You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
This is the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. I am your host, Lester Blosser, joined by my co-host and good friend, the extremely talented Stephen White. How are we doing today, Stephen?
Doing all right. I was a little spaced this morning.
Yeah.
I forgot we were doing this, but it's all right.
I noticed that this morning. I messaged you about the show, and you apologized saying you were spaced out. So I know you got a lot going on, and I know that there's some exciting things going on. So I thought maybe we would talk a little bit about why you were a little spaced this morning, because it is exciting. So please go ahead. Tell us what was going on this morning.
Well, I have recently gotten a freelance gig with JoeBlow.com. If you're at all familiar with this website and their content, they've got numerous YouTube channels. So definitely check those out. And they have all these different series they do, which I was kind of a fan prior to getting the gig. So I think that kind of helped a little bit. Maybe not to land the gig, but to understand how their videos operate. Because they have multiple series. They've got like, what the fuck happened to this horror film or film? What happened to this actor? The series that I'm editing is called Face Off, where they pit two characters or movies together and try to decide which is the best. The first one that I did, and both of these will probably be out by the time this episode airs, so you can definitely go check these out, and I might have another one up. Who knows? We'll see. But the first one I did was Infernal Affairs versus The Departed. Now, I was familiar with The Departed. Obviously, that was a Martin Scorsese joint, and it was pretty damn good.
Jack Nicholson.
I didn't know it was a remake. Like, did you know that?
No, I had no idea.
I had no idea either.
Wow.
So apparently, it was a remake of a Chinese film called Infernal Affairs, and the idea behind the Face Off was to pretty much pit both films together, observe cast, story, changes that were done, like how the pacing goes, things like that, and how each director approached the films, characterizations, just numerous, ideas and comparisons between the two, and decide which is the better film. If I'm not mistaken, that one came out at a draw, because each film had its strengths and weaknesses based on what the original did versus what Scorsese did in the remake. And it's fascinating to really break it down like that. You don't think about it, but ironically, that's what we'll be talking about today. Like, what makes all this stuff click. Yeah. The one that I was working on this week that ate up a lot of my time, but I feel strongly about it, and I'm gracious to the people over there that they allow me creativity to just create the video, not just follow it to the script. Wolverine versus Deadpool. And once they handed me that, I was like, all right, okay, now you're giving me something I can really sink my teeth into, because obviously I'm a huge comic fan. Yeah. And Wolverine and Deadpool are two of the biggest icons in comics, so it was just like, oh yeah, I'm going to have fun with this. And at any turn that I had an idea, I was like, oh man, I got to do this. Oh man, I got to do that. And I felt like I was spending most of my week, like I would have an idea and I was like, well, I got to go dig this up. I got to go dig that up. And I got to go put this together, and doing less editing and more creating for editing purposes. And apparently it turned out really well. The producer was just like, this is perfect. Just a few minor little tweaks here and there. And the tweaks that he gave me benefit the video. Like, there were little things that maybe I just kind of missed, because in editing, if you sit with something long enough, you're going to space out on it. You know what I mean? You're going to think, I've got everything. Haven't I got everything? And it's a 15-minute video, so I'm bound to miss something.
Yeah.
Or you watch it enough times, it's like, yeah, I think it's good. And then you've overlooked that one little 3 or 4 seconds that somebody else is going to pick up on, and that's why he's there. So I appreciated that, but I'm excited about it. I can't wait for people to see it. But yeah, that's what I've been working on this week.
Well, and I gotta say, just a shout out to you real quick. I think it's super awesome that a company's, reaching out and, appreciating your talent. Because I think you have a lot of talent that goes underappreciated. Definitely.
Well, thank you.
And that's just awesome too. The Departed's one of my favorite films of all time. I didn't know it was a remake.
I didn't either. And it really made me want to go watch that after putting that together. Yeah. I tried to actively seek it out, and the only place I could find it was Apple TV. Like, they've got it, I guess you have to rent it there, but no other platform has it, which I thought was very interesting. But it's definitely something I want to check out.
It definitely sounds it definitely sounds like an interesting show that you're doing the editing for too. I think it's cool when they do face-offs like that. The only kind of film face-off or anything of that nature that I've ever really seen, like on YouTube or anywhere like that, is there's a YouTube channel that does like death matches where they take characters from different franchises or different movies that you wouldn't even think of to ever meet each other, and they make them fight, and they see who the winner would be. That's nothing like this. Obviously, this is films going up against each other, and I think that's just awesome that they would think of an idea like that. I mean, there's so much possibility with it. But
there's been quite a few that I've watched over the years, and it's funny. I didn't observe them through an editing lens before I actually got the job. And now I watch other people's videos, not to critique them, but to observe their choices, like what they decided to do in this instance, what they decided to do in that instance, and not to really critique them or decide, well, I could do this better or I could do that better. It's more to see, I've got my approach, and I'm trying to understand other people's approaches as well. It's not something I've ever really done from an editing standpoint, but now I have something to compare it to.
Yeah.
Because other people are also working on similar videos, and now I can see how my approach differs from theirs, and it's kind of a nice view.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I would assume that would give you, in some cases, I'm sure that can give you some inspiration to maybe look at something a little differently than you normally would, and maybe change your editing style just a little bit because something might work better for what you're doing at that time.
Right. Like one of the choices that I made early on, and it's not a necessity, but they have a scorecard in between each round, and it shows, how many rounds there are and then who gets the point on each end. And some of them, they just use little check marks. That's who wins, so on and so forth. And at first, in the very first video, I was going to just use check marks. And I thought, I have an opportunity to be a little creative here. What could I do that could make it fun or maybe amp it up a little bit? So I found a way to incorporate like bullets, like bullet shots. And so every time someone wins a round, you get a bullet hole pop up in the screen between, on either side, depending on who wins the round. Yeah. And I thought that was kind of a way to reflect to the movies, because they're like gang movies or crime dramas. And I thought the gunshot would be kind of neat with Wolverine and Deadpool. This was tough because I wasn't sure like how to approach it, because, it could be, do I use the same icon on each end? Do I use something different on each end? Obviously, Deadpool's got an iconic symbol, so I thought that would be cool on his end, but how do I incorporate something like that with Wolverine? Do I do like claw marks or something like that? And eventually I settled on like using the digital characters from, you remember the Marvel vs. Capcom games?
Yeah.
So Wolverine's got a few little moves here and there. Deadpool, he was apparently in one of the games that I don't remember. I guess it was like one of the later ones, but I got a characterization of each on each side every time they win. So Wolverine comes up and does like a slash move from the game, and then a little Wolverine head pops up. On Deadpool's side, he pulls out guns, bang, 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 and then his symbol pops up. And I thought, well, that would be kind of a neat way to incorporate both of what they're known for and use their symbols or a visage of them. So it was nice, and the producer, he was just like, no, I like that. I thought that was really
That's awesome.
creative.
That is super, super awesome. I can't wait to see him.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be out this week. But again, to all of you listening, it's probably out already. So jump on.
If you haven't checked it out yet, since it'll probably be out, check it out.
I'll probably put a link or something in the show notes if y'all want to check it out.
Yeah, that'd work. That would work. Now, I also have to mention you had a pretty busy weekend too. You you went to a festival. What's the festival called? I can never remember the name of it, and I feel bad.
No. It's the Full Moon Tattoo and Horror Convention in Nashville. It's actually hosted by the Full Moon Tattoo Shop that's down in that same area. And they've actually been doing it for quite a while. The very first one that I ever went to, I think, was in 2013. Now, I don't know if, like, how long it had been going on at the time, but I remember going to that one. It was in a different location. It was actually in downtown Nashville, which I'm not a fan of downtown anywhere because I just don't like driving city streets and whatnot. But we went to that one. It was in a big fancy hotel, and they had a lot of tattoo, because they do kind of both. It's you meet horror icons, and then you can get a tattoo if you want. And there's different tattoo booths set up with different companies in the area. And at that one in 2013, Walking Dead was riding high. I remember Norman Reedus was at that one, and there was a line around the building, and it was just like, nah, I'm not gonna even attempt that. I don't have time for this.
Right.
But I did meet a few others. I met Bill Moseley at that one, Sid Haig, Tom Towles, Linda Blair, and Lou Temple, I think. There might have been more, but those are the ones I remember distinctly. And it was kind of neat. I'd never done that before, and everybody was pretty cool. Linda Blair was very... she was very concerned about her dogs. She has that charity where they take care of dogs and rescues and whatnot, I think is what it is. And that seemed to be her goal there. It's just like, I'm a fan, obviously Exorcist and other things. And she's like, well, good. If you're a fan, then you'll want to support my rescue. And it's like, you're pitching me. Okay. But she was cool. It was the picture I actually have with me and her. I look like a crazy person. My eyes are just like bugged out, I guess, because I couldn't believe I was standing beside Linda Blair.
Wonderful.
But they do this, or they've been doing it a lot more here recently, and it was in the same spot we had it. You went with us last year.
Yeah.
And it was in the same place, same setup. It wasn't very crowded, which I kind of appreciated, and everybody was kind of set up in different spots. And we met. Luckily, there was a different set of people this time. It wasn't just the same guests again, which I appreciate. You're not going back and seeing the same people again and again and again. You want some fresh faces. And I had to go this year because Joe Bob Briggs was going to be there, and I don't know if I've gushed enough about the last drive-in on the show yet, but it's like one of my all-time favorite things. So I was ecstatic to meet him.
And I just have to say real quick, because you sent me a photo of the picture that you guys got together, and I just have to say, Joe Bob Briggs is a monster of a man. He is gigantic. I mean, you look like a little kid next to him.
And I'm about 5'9", so if you take a look at the picture and do comparison, I think my head reached maybe not even his shoulders. I think I was like right under his shoulders. I'd have to look at the picture again, but I know I wasn't like at shoulder length.
And I'm a little shorter than you, so if I were to meet him, I would probably look like a 12-year-old child.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell, like, you watch a show, you can tell he's a tall man, but until you're there standing beside them, I think when I met Rhett and Link the very first time, that was also the same situation. They're tall. They talk about being tall, and then you stand amongst them, and you're just like, shit, I'm short, compared to these two giants.
Now,
it's just insane.
Now, I know you said when you met him he was a little frazzled because he had spilled his coffee, but
yeah,
you said he was
spilled it all over the table.
But you said he was a very nice guy.
Oh yeah. He seemed like I don't know what his day had been up to that point. He just seemed like he was a little exhausted, and of course the coffee situation I'm sure didn't I'm sure that's embarrassing, I mean, some guy comes up to you and wants to meet you, and then next thing you know, you're dumping coffee all over everything.
Right.
It was like on T-shirts and pictures and everything, and he's like, oh, man. So I think he's just kind of reeling from it at the moment where he's like, I can't believe I did that. I don't know what I was doing. But we went back the second day, saw him again. He seemed like he's a little calmer and cooler, about it. And, it happened. And we actually got to see him later that night because he was doing a show. And if you've ever heard of his show, How Redneck Saved Hollywood, I highly recommend it. He does shows. You can go on his website. You can find dates wherever he's coming. If you see he's coming to town where you can go see him, go check this out. This was a delight. I wasn't sure what this was, but it was almost like a 2-hour essay on redneck cinema and how it saved Hollywood. And you're sitting there thinking, wow, what? No, what? That doesn't add up.
One of those subgenres.
Yeah, but he brings it all around by the end. You're like, holy crap, that was pretty clever. But he talks about, obviously there are certain ones that come to mind. Deliverance, I was waiting on that one. Obviously he talked about it. Lesser known stuff, maybe like Spit on Your Grave, which, I mean, if you're a diehard horror fan, you know about that one. Or even another one like Gator Bait, which... he actually showed that on the last drive-in last season, and was it last season? It might have been one of his specials. I'm not 100%. No, yep, it was. It was the Christmas special for the end of last year because they were doing gift exchanges, him and Darcy, and it was just like, well, what movie would you want to see? What movie would you want to see? And that was their gift to each other. So Darcy brought him Gator Bait, and I had seen this movie as a teenager and had to turn it off. Because there's one scene in that movie. I don't know if you've seen it.
I can't say that I have. I'm going to have to watch it now.
Okay, so I won't say what it is, but there's one scene in the movie. And I even told people who are watching, because you can do live tweets during the show, which I recommend. It's kind of fun, to sit there and interact with the other mutants in the group. But there was one of my Twitter friends who had said, I've never seen this movie. And I said, I'm going to warn you now. I said, I watched this movie when I was, probably 12, 13, maybe a little older. I stopped watching after one scene because it just kind of brought me to like a moment of like, oh my God, I feel sick to my stomach right now. I didn't throw up. It just hit me wrong because I was like, I've never seen anything like that in a film before. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it hit me wrong. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. So I warned them ahead of time. I said, just be warned. There's a scene in this movie that's going to catch you off guard and you're going to be like, holy shit. So beyond that, I said, I'm going to try to sit and watch this movie from beginning to end, with Joe Bob talking about it. And I did. And it didn't bother me the second time. I guess because when you're aware of it,
yeah,
you've already got the expectation. Your mind is set and you're just like, all right, well, it's still bad, but I was able to handle it. But when you don't see it coming and it happens, you're just like, oh my God, what just happened? And the entire movie's not like that, like in its entirety. It's just that one scene is like, whoa, who thought this was a great idea to write into a script?
Oh man, now I'm going to definitely have to watch it.
Yeah, definitely check it out. It's on the Christmas special they did back in 2021. So I'd highly recommend checking that out, or just the show in general. And new season started, or should start, on April 29th, so it should be starting here. It should already be on by the time you're watching this, on Shudder. Not a sponsor, just trying to get more eyes on it.
Yeah, I did a little bit of reading about Joe Bob Briggs, because I knew about Joe Bob Briggs, and I was a fan, but I didn't know quite as much about him as you do. I think you're more of an avid fan of him than I originally was. Like, I liked him, I liked his show, but I didn't know it as well as you did. But I guess before he got onto Shudder, or right when he got onto Shudder, the first season of The Last Drive-In was going to be like his last time being on like broadcast. Like, he was considering retiring and everything else, but then he came back on and he really loved it, and he remembered how much he how much he actually does love it. And, he's kept doing it. So I hope that he continues to do it as long as he possibly can, because he is a funny guy. Yeah. He's a smart guy. And, learning things about films that you think there's nothing better in the world than that. You learn something new about a film that you thought you knew everything about.
Yeah.
Go Go ahead.
The approach that they have to it, I think that's why I love watching it so much, is because even if it's a really, really bad movie that maybe you know something about and you're just like, man, this movie, you can sit through it.
Yeah.
Because you're watching it in snippets pretty much. And then he comes in, gives you a little backstory, and it kind of helps you appreciate it just a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, because you have this understanding behind the scenes about why this decision may have been made, or why this decision was made, or maybe even background info about the actors, directors, just anything in general. And it makes the whole experience more interesting, no matter how bad the movie is. Because I've watched some stinkers on there before, but you can still appreciate that he can find something to talk about. Or that it's worth talking about because of this or that, and you know, you can find some appreciation for the movie,
which is a wonderful
I like
thing.
that.
Yeah. Now, speaking of movies, speaking of some stinkers, and speaking of what we talked about at the very beginning here, you talking about The Departed and you know it being a remake, that actually brings us into the subject of our show today. This is going to be a 2-part show. Next episode, we'll be talking about the positive side, but this is Remakes from Hell Part 1, and this is films that should burn. Remakes that were just terrible. We're going to talk about them, about why they're terrible, what they could have probably done different, and, you know, just in general, why remakes can be a good thing or a bad thing. So, I don't know if you want to go first or if you want me to go first. I've got a few films. I'm sure you have a few. So whatever you would like to do.
Let's see. If I'm trying to think of a horror remake that I don't care for, you know what? Okay, let's start with Fright Night, because Fright Night is this teeters a line for me. Okay, Fright Night is probably the original is probably one of my all-time favorite horror films.
Yeah,
because there's just so much about it that works. It's simplistic, but every element to it just meshes perfectly. It feels like I can't think of a single plot hole in the film, even though there probably is one. I can't think of one. I feel like every beat, the way the story paces, how it plays out, it all works. It all works beautifully, and everybody in the movie is doing a fantastic job. Every cast member is perfectly cast. I can't think of anybody else to play every role that would have been any better than the cast we got. So to me, it's perfect. And the sequel, there's a reason it's lesser than. It doesn't work because there's just some of that magic missing, and I get it. And it shows. So with the remake, I wanted to like it because obviously it's a favorite, but I was trepidatious. The cast is fairly solid for what they had, because Anton Yelchin, sad loss, if you ask me, that he died so young, because he had a bright career ahead of him. And I hate that what happened to him happened, but I don't fault him for this at all. He put in his best as usual. Colin Farrell as Jerry Dandridge, fantastic.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I can't think of anybody, because you needed somebody who had that charming, likable visage, like Chris Sarandon. That's what made Jerry Dandridge so beautiful. Is he's just this great guy you just want to hang out with, and you don't know he's a vampire, but just like, dude, I'd have a beer with this guy. He's awesome.
Right.
So you needed someone who could be charismatic like that. They stuck. I appreciate when you can do something different, like when you're taking the base concept and you're trying to morph it into something different. However, I feel like they just dropped the ball somehow. There were good elements to it that I appreciated, but overall it just didn't come together like it should have.
Yeah.
Because again, you're working from a very simple premise. My neighbor's a vampire and no one believes me. That's all you got to have, okay? But something about their execution just didn't land properly like the original. And I appreciate that they didn't do a copy and paste. I'll get into that one again, because that just made me remember of another one that I really despise, and I guess I'll go down the list. The actor, I can't remember his name. He played McLovin on Superbad.
Yeah,
He's that little.
I can never remember his name. He was in Kick-Ass as well.
Yeah. I can't remember his name. It's right there. Anyway, that guy, whose name is I'll come up with it in a minute. Anyway, he played Evil Ed, and I felt like if there was a character miscast, or one of the few miscast characters, it would have been him. Because he didn't play Evil Ed the way, Stephen Jeffries did.
Yeah.
Christopher Mintz-Plasse. Plasse. I don't know how to say his last name. He's got one of those weird last names.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's a good actor. I like him and stuff, but his Evil Ed just didn't feel like the Evil Ed that we had in the original. And again, not trying to copy. I appreciate it, but it just felt off. You know what I mean? Like even I'm trying to remember how he came off in the film, because it was Evil Ed, despite being this huge horror fan, he was amused by the idea that Charlie was going, hey, I got a vampire. And he's like, okay, you're crazy, but whatever. And then eventually he learns the facts. This version, I honestly feel like he knew ahead of time.
Yeah.
Or something to that effect. And I just didn't like how that dynamic worked between the two, based on how he came into the picture knowing about it, and then it just kind of, I don't know, it didn't work for me like the original did. I liked that Charlie was the only one who knew and was doing his damnedest to convince everybody. I felt like that's what they did wrong here, is they didn't follow through with that idea.
Yeah.
You know, stick to your guns on that. One person knows, and he's trying to convince everybody, and no one's buying it. You know, you could have done that. And then David Tennant as Peter Vincent was a magician, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Or some,
he was some Vegas magician or whatnot. Yeah.
Didn't quite understand why he would have gotten involved. You know, like he just it felt odd.
Yeah.
With Roddy McDowall's version being, you know, I believe in vampires. I'm a vampire hunter. I'm in the movies. That made sense because Charlie admired this actor. He kind of equated the two as like, oh yeah, you love vampires, and he says, I believe in vampires, even though it's an act. In that moment, Charlie's desperate, and he's just like, yeah, he'll help me because he said he believes in vampires. Of course, I'll go to my hero, Peter Vincent, and he'll help me out. And the dynamic works. With Peter Vincent here, I don't remember why he was approached to begin with, because how does a magician know about vampires, and how does that all kind of come together? It just seems like an odd choice to make him a magician, a stage magician in Vegas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just, something about it just seems off. I appreciate trying to do something different, but I feel like there could have been a better approach. Even if you did like the aging actor or somebody. And I know David Tennant wouldn't have been an aging actor at the time, but I don't know. It feels wrong to the story, you know? Like, it just seems like an afterthought. It's like, well, what can we do different? Make him a magician. That'll be fine. Okay.
It seems like they want to adjust it just a little bit, and I think it takes away from the magic that the first film caught.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit more as we go on, there's just some films that don't need to be remade. Simply because if it can be timeless in its own way, like there's nothing about it that stands apart to say this cannot be viewed through another lens but this point in time. Like there are dated movies. I get it. Yeah. You know, you look at something, it's like you can't do this anymore because you just dated the hell out of this because of a joke or a reference or something. I can't think of anything outside of maybe the fashion that makes the original Fright Night not timeless.
Yeah, I mean,
because
easy to follow. Even if they're making some weird 80s reference or, you know, anything else, it's not like it's going to be anything way out there that somebody's not going to get a laugh about or anything.
Yeah, like the only two things that I could possibly say could be iffy that someone could probably point to and say is dated is maybe Peter Vincent's show. But again, we just talked about The Last Drive-In. I mean, he's doing the same thing. If you think about it, Joe Bob and Peter Vincent, they're hosting a show, presenting horror films, and talking about them. So you could do that in the same vein now.
Yeah.
And then The dance scene where they go into the nightclub,
Mm-hmm.
sure, it's very 80s dated, but they're still nightclubs. It's not like, you don't have dance clubs anymore, so it still works.
True.
It's not like it's an 80s thing. So I really feel like the film itself can be considered timeless, because I can't think of anything that just makes it stand as something that's 80s only.
And I think some movies fit better into the time frame that they were made,
Sure.
And I'll kind of get into that too here a little bit later on. So, but yeah, I think that big time.
So what do you have? Because that I've started to think of a few more as that one came about.
Well, my first one's going to be the one that irritates me the most.
Okay.
The Nightmare on Elm Street remake. It came out in 2009 or 2010. I'm a little fuzzy on when exactly it came out. But
Yeah.
that movie, to me, I'm an avid Nightmare on Elm Street fan. I've loved all the films. Before that movie even got made, there was a lot of really weird things that happened. Apparently, Wes Craven didn't want to sign over rights completely, and some things happened. Some people say that he got swindled. Of course, some of this stuff's just hearsay.
Mm-hmm.
They said that Robert Englund had no interest in playing Freddy or being involved at all. Robert Englund has come out and said before, nobody really asked me anything about the movie. Heather Langenkamp, who played Nancy in the original, her husband owns a special effects company. He does all kinds of special effects. Heather Langenkamp was actually in one of the newer Star Trek movies. He had done the special effects for it and had her completely dressed as an alien. Guy is extremely talented. He does makeup for American Horror Story, stuff like that. He actually got someone to reach out to him about Freddy in the remake because they weren't even sure what Freddy was going to look like. They had a lot of trouble even realizing what Freddy would look like. And to me, that just screamed a red flag right away. You're having issue deciding what you want your villain to look at. Freddy is one of the biggest parts of Nightmare on Elm Street. He is Nightmare on Elm Street, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And the problem that I have with the new film was they did sort of do the whole copy and paste thing in a lot of ways. There was a lot of stuff from the original film that they just slapped into this film, and they tried to do it bigger. And the thing that made the original Nightmare on Elm Street so fantastic is you don't really see Freddy that much in the original film. Freddy's only got about 7 minutes of screen time, maybe a little over 7 minutes of screen time in the original film. The effects are all practical, and they pull them off beautifully in the film. They keep it very simplistic in the original film. A lot of that had to do with budget and things like that. I understand that. But then you turn around and you do this remake. Little things that should have just stayed little. Things that could have worked.
Yeah.
Perfect example. Freddy stretches through the wall in the remake. They do it with CGI. And this is when CGI was still... It was good, but it wasn't the best.
Right.
They have him stretch through the wall, and I'm like, okay, that's not too bad. They're having him stretch through the wall. That'll work. Well, then he kind of stretches out of the wall to the side, and his arm comes out of the wall as well. And then his blades come out of the wall, and it just looks cheesy. It looks terrible.
Yeah.
The bathtub scene is another scene. They redid that scene in the new, in the remake. And in the original movie, Nancy's in the tub, and there's a couple shampoo bottles. Nothing much, nothing too crazy. This new movie, marketing is big. And I'm sure that they had all that stuff in the bathtub for marketing purposes. But they had so much stuff in the tub. They had it so just overwhelmed with just crap. It was cluttered. And, I get some people's houses are cluttered. And, maybe that made it seem more realistic. But in the original movie, they had a couple shampoo bottles. Nothing too crazy. Nancy gets pulled into the tub. A little bit of crazy stuff happens. She gets out of the tub. This new movie, instead of being focused on what's happening to Nancy, you're like, oh man, all that stuff falling into the tub's going to hit her in her fucking head. And to me, it took away from the scene.
Right.
The other thing is with the acting. So I don't know how true this is. Rooney Mara played Nancy in the remake. Now, I like Rooney Mara. I do. I think she is a good actress. The only thing that I do not like about Rooney Mara is there was a big disinterest in playing Nancy. She really didn't want the part. Her manager at the time said, look, you're getting into acting. This is going to be, kind of a stepping stone. I know I've talked about that before. And so she treated it like it was a stepping stone. And you can see that in her performance. Her performance is not the best. And I like her, like I said. And then let's talk about Freddy. I'm going to come right down to Freddy. Now, I love Jackie Earle Haley. I think Jackie Earle Haley is extremely talented. I think he is a wonderful actor. I didn't mind him as Freddy. To me, it was sort of like Rorschach became Freddy Krueger because he played Rorschach. I actually enjoyed The Watchmen. I thought it was a decent movie. You know, I might get some hate from some people, but there were things about it that I liked. And I really liked Jackie Earle Haley as Rorschach. I thought he did awesome in that movie. I thought he did a decent job as Freddy as well. And it was a much more dry and, you know, vicious Freddy. But that's the Freddy that they were trying to go for. Mm-hmm. And I thought Jackie Earle Haley did a pretty decent job. I just don't think the material that they gave him was the best to work with. And I feel bad for the guy. You know, it's kind of like what you were just saying with Fright Night. Excellent actors. It's just some of the source material wasn't necessarily the best.
Right.
My big thing with it is they went full-fledged child molester. Now, that's what Wes Craven originally wanted to do with Nightmare on Elm Street. He was going to broadcast that a little bit more. But at the time, in California, there was this big upheaving of evidence of all these nannies and like house care workers and stuff that were molesting children. And Wes Craven knew that if he put that into a movie at that point in time with everything going on, that movie would sink. Yeah. So he kind of pulled back from that. Now, I think they could have made that angle work. They could have made Freddy really disgusting and everything else. They could have come out and just flat out said it. I don't think they did it the right way. That's my big issue with it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make the character enjoyable to watch. And I know it sounds weird. You know, you're not supposed to enjoy the slashers, you know, apparently. But the thing is, with all of the original slashers, people actually like them. Like, they know they're bad guys, but there's something about them that's redeemable. Even Freddy in Part 2 of Nightmare on Elm Street, which a lot of people give hate to Part 2 of Nightmare on Elm Street, but let's be honest, one of the best looks for Freddy was in Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and Freddy was the scariest that he has ever been in Nightmare on Elm Street 2. He didn't joke around a whole lot. He was just, I'm going to kill all you kids. Now, they tried to do that in the remake. They tried to make it, you know, scary. They tried to give Freddy that creep factor. And it worked, I thought, for the most part. You know, there's a scene with a dog in it where the girl's dreaming and she sees her dog and her dog's all, you know, bloody and it's dead on the ground. And it turns out, you know, Freddy's right there and he's got blood on his claws and he goes, I was just petting him. You know, that's a messed up scene, but it works.
Yeah.
Like, I feel bad for saying this, but I kind of chuckled about it because just the way that he says it, and he has this grin on his face, and it's just wonderful.
Right.
The biggest thing that I think really was kind of cool to me in the new movie, a thing that I will say I thought was really unique, was they started doing, I think they called them like micro naps or something of the nature.
Micro naps.
Where the kids had gone without sleep for so long that they were falling asleep while they were up and about. So Freddy was like sort of coming into the real world in those moments. And I thought that they pulled that off really well. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I think it's just a shell of the original film. They pulled stuff from the original film. They're like, this is cool, this works. Let's just redo all this. We're going to try to do it better, make it bigger. And I think that's where they really failed because they were trying to just outdo the original. That was their whole intention. They didn't try to do something new. Yeah. And that really bothered me. It's just like in the jail scene in the remake. The kid gets killed in the jail scene. His chest just burst open. And, you know, it's a cool scene. It looks cool. You know, the effects are great. But in the original movie, when the boyfriend is in jail for killing Tina, Freddy comes in and he wraps his blanket around his neck and he hangs him up from his blanket. So it looks like the boyfriend killed the girlfriend, then he killed himself in jail. The only death in the first movie that seems just way out there is Johnny Depp's, because Johnny Depp's in the first, you know, he gets pulled into the bed. But up until his death, it just seemed like somebody murdered someone and then they committed suicide.
Yeah.
And that was a unique way to do that. It made it have this creep factor, you know, but I think their biggest mistakes were they didn't really speak to Wes Craven and they didn't speak to Robert Englund. Now I get, you know, Robert Englund has no stake in the franchise itself. Yes, he's Freddy, but if they decide to pick a new actor and do everything different, they can do that. But I think when this movie come out, they should have talked to Wes Craven. They should have talked to Robert Englund. Even if Robert Englund wasn't going to play Freddy, even if Wes Craven wasn't going to direct, they should have just brought them on and been like, can we get some advice on what you think maybe we should do in this regard? Because it works. You know, they know these characters. And yes, the fans want to see the originals. You know, fans of Robert Englund's Freddy want to see him play Freddy until he's 100. He could be Freddy Krueger in a wheelchair. They wouldn't care. Mm-hmm. But it works when you get some advice from these original performers, and you can make something new. That way a new generation can appreciate it. Fans that are maybe getting a little burnout can appreciate something new. But grab those people if they're still here and get the help. It's just like with The Mandalorian. They've had George Lucas come onto the set and actually help out a little bit. He's done some consulting work. Nothing crazy, just a little bit of, I think this would work, I think this wouldn't work. But to me, the 2010, I believe it was 2010, remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, it comes up short because I think that they focused on all the wrong things. Sure, yes, it has some cool effects. Yes, it has some unique scenes. There's a few things that I enjoy about it. I like when Freddy gets stabbed in the eye with the scissors and he pulls them out of his eye and he's not hurt at all. And he just chuckles about it. And I like when she's running down the hallway and the whole hallway turns to blood and she falls into the blood in the hallway and it comes out of the ceiling of another room, but she's completely clean when she hits the bed. Those are some cool scenes. But aside from that, I don't find anything about that film redeemable at all. I think the performances are shoddy, and I think that Jackie Earle Haley really got cheated because I think he could have done an amazing job. I really do. Mm. But that would be one of my big films. Now, I know you said you had another one that you were really thinking about. So what's the other one for you?
Yeah. Well, a few kind of come up as you're sitting there talking. I'm sitting there thinking.
We might agree on some of these.
To your point. To your point, I mean, I would have to agree. The one misstep, or the biggest misstep I feel like that film could have done, especially considering where you mentioned that they leaned into the child molester angle a lot more, which I have to agree. When you don't say it, and like in the originals, they just say child murderer. They never say child molester. You're just kind of like, okay. Yeah. You know, as bad as that is, he's still killing
They hint at the molestation side. They just hint at it.
But they never specifically state it. Therefore, you're just like, well, he just kills kids. That's all he's doing. And you know, fine, whatever. And he's likable. Like you said, the moment you say child molester, you're just like, nope, can't like this guy, can't like
It's okay to kill him, just don't molest them, apparently.
Right. But I genuinely feel like they should have leaned into and made him innocent.
Yeah.
Because that would have been a twist that did not happen in the original. Yep. And then you give him an entirely new motive. He's just out for revenge.
You create something completely new and original while still feeding into the character. It can still be the same story. He got burned alive and now he's seeking revenge. But like you said, it would have been amazing if they would have been like, he was actually innocent.
Yeah. Like all these parents thought the worst of him and he got punished for it. So now he's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take your kids away from you. You know, I'm going to take my kids back, so to speak, because you took them from me. I'm going to take them and absorb them and, you know, take their soul so they'll be with me forever so I can protect them, or some weird, you know, mentality that he's going through that he thinks makes this okay.
But they did a great value version of the original.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what it boils down to. So I'm going to piggyback off of yours to reflect on one of my favorite franchises, Friday the 13th, and that remake, because this seems like it should have been easy enough to do, and for the most part, they did follow through to what a Friday the 13th movie is. Yeah. But I think what hurts the remake is it's just so boring. I mean, it's so by the numbers that you're just sitting there watching it going, okay, this is just like an updated version of this one or that one, like one of the earlier ones, and you're just like, they're not doing anything really outside of the ordinary, save for maybe Jason trying to explain how he's able to go from point A to point B really fast because he's got the underground chasms and tunnels and whatnot, which, you know, was kind of a neat little addition.
Right.
And the fact that we're kind of going back to Jason as not a supernatural character, but more of he's not quite right in the head. He's been living out in the woods. So, I mean, everything about him has to kind of line up for that. And I think they did a good job at portraying him like that. But, and I guess there's really no explanations in the originals, but I don't feel like the way they set it up, especially at the beginning, because they started the entire movie with the end of the first film. And then just showed that Jason just happened to be there. But something about that just feels empty.
Yeah.
Okay, so you think he's dead, but he's still alive. Which, again, I know that's a big plot hole in the original narrative. But why not take an opportunity to maybe explain how that was even plausible to begin with?
Yeah.
If at all. So it just felt empty. Like you had this opportunity and you squandered it just to say, well, here, look, we're doing the exact same thing that we did at the original. And then Jason just shows up and is like, oh, my mom's dead. Okay, so why does that turn him into a sadistic serial killer?
Yeah.
Like you understand protecting his ground, but why is he the way he is? You could really explore that.
And I just have to say this real quick. One thing for that movie that was, because I will agree with you on this film too. One thing about the film that really drove me crazy, I found a lot of the characters just boring.
Yeah.
So.
Like, there's something about them that they, like I said, it's the boring part. It's the movie as a whole. The characters are uninteresting. The plot itself is just kind of
generic.
Meh. Yeah, I mean, okay, so one of the campers or one of the people went missing, and someone's come to look for, and there just happens to be a bunch of other kids. Okay, what are you doing different? I'm not expecting them to reinvent the wheel, but inject it with something fresh. I mean, you really just went by the numbers with a Friday the 13th movie.
Yeah.
And it just feels like it's lacking something. You had the opportunity to really step it up, and you just made another basic Friday the 13th. Some of the kills are cool. I'll give them that. But beyond that, it's just kind of meh.
Well, and not to mention the fact that, the characters that you actually start to like, and you and I have had this conversation before, but some of the characters that you actually grow to like, you expect some of them to die in the movie, but there's characters where there could have been so much more growth, and then they're just taken, and they're killed in like a really generic way, and you're like, wait a minute now, come on, there's got to be something.
Sure.
One of the deaths at the end of the movie, I've told you this before, it's when the main character, him and the girl that he's been running with, they find his sister, and they're escaping the underground chasms that Jason uses, and he gets his sister out first, he gets out, and then he goes to grab her, and boom, machete through the chest. To this day, that scene still irritates me every time I see it, because she was a good character, and I get, like I said, I get characters will die, but I just feel like the audience was kind of cheated by that. I think that was just for shock value, and it was just done poorly. So,
I mean, there could have been a way to do that and make it pay off, but like you said, it feels like it was a wrong move.
Yeah.
Just like you said, for shock value, and it felt wrong for that character to die. Especially when you follow the rules that a lot of these movies have, and if they were following the rules like that, she wouldn't have died.
Yeah.
Because what did she do wrong? She didn't do anything wrong. She was probably one of the best characters out of the group.
Yeah, and she wasn't boring. I think that's the thing about it that irritates me. She wasn't boring.
And the plot thread about him keeping the sister because it looks like his mom, I'm not saying Jason wouldn't do that, and it did kind of give a new layer to the character, but I don't feel like it paid off in any way to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Other than to just keep the sister alive and give him a reason to come find her.
Yeah, and I mean, and they honestly could have, if she looked enough like his mom, I'm pretty sure she could have probably used that to get away from him.
Yeah.
As,
And it would have paid off even more in dividends. Like she could have used him or gotten into his head, because there was a scene where they kind of played with it or toyed with it for a minute, but it didn't go anywhere. It was just like, he was like, no, I'm not going to listen to you. And then he runs off. But then again, why would he do that?
Yeah.
He seems to think that this is his mom, right? That's why she's captive. So explore that.
Yeah.
You barely touch on it, and then you just, it never pays off.
Yeah.
So it just feels kind of hollow, other than just a reason for the brother to come looking for her and give him a motive.
Yeah. Well, and that's like the movie that I was telling you about that's on YouTube, Never Hike Alone. You know, that is a fan-made film of Friday the 13th, but they went and they did a complete 180. They took it in a completely different direction. You know, it's a guy hiking. It's from first-person view, and they do third person. But it's just one guy. It's not about body count. It's one guy trying to survive Jason Voorhees. And Jason's stalking him, trying to find him. And this guy knows a lot of survival stuff. It's almost like Predator, but Jason's the predator.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting idea, and it was something different. I don't know if you've gotten the chance to watch that yet. I know you had it on your watch list.
It's definitely on my watch list.
But, you know, why not take an angle like that? You know, it doesn't have to be all about the body count. And I think that's also where these movies kind of, you know, they mess up. Just like this latest Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I have not watched. You told me not to waste my time.
Nope.
All about body count. You know, I heard the best thing about that film was the special effects. So
yeah, that's about it.
But
and you know, to kind of piggyback off of that, your comment kind of made me remember something that kind of sat in my head here recently, and I can't remember what really spurred it on, but movies that sparingly use gore but really make it pop, I feel like sometimes that's when it's the most impactful. Take a movie like Misery, for example. Okay, the entire movie is, or let's say 90% of the movie is gore free.
Yeah.
Okay, it's all about tension. It's all about, you know, the characterizations and how they are interacting with the two, and just that intensity of being held captive. But then when you get those moments of gore, like the hobbling scene, or even when the sheriff got shot, they almost feel out of place, but in the right ways, because you have not been seeing gore constantly throughout the movie, and then suddenly, boom, oh my God, there's gore, and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
You know, you're taken aback by it, because it's not a gory film, or it's not meant to be a gory film, but there are those moments that just come at you out of nowhere, and you're like, whoa, okay. Like, it almost feels like a shift, but in all the right ways, because it pays off because of it.
yeah.
Because now you're like, whoa, we just stepped into new territory. I don't know what to do. And sometimes, like you said, I feel like holding back, you don't have to have the body count. Make that stuff pay off. So when someone does die, you're just like, whoa, okay, I didn't see that coming, because all this time we've been building, and then now you just snatch it away from me. Make that stuff count.
The audience really feels it when you build up to it, and that makes it count even more. Mm-hmm. Now, did you have some more to say about Friday the 13th? Or
no, like the movie itself, it's just kind of hollow.
Okay. Now, I know we could talk about this forever, but I will say this. This is one final film that I want to like touch base on real quick, because let's be honest, there's a lot of good movies out there too.
I've got one more as well. So
okay. Well, the big one for me is Hellraiser. They've made so many remakes of it, and I won't really have to say much about this. All I can say is this: the movie has just turned into shocking people, just shock value, coming up with crazy deaths, and the people that they've been picking to play the Cenobites, not the best.
No.
You know, honestly, there's not much for me to say about it. Just, you know, it's one of those things you should just give it a watch if you really want to see. You'll watch 15 minutes of it and go, why did I even bother? That's all I'll say about Hellraiser. That's all I'll say about Hellraiser. But I'll let you name off your last one, and then we'll get into some of our closing comments, because we're coming up on an hour here.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm going to comment on that as well with your Hellraiser thing.
Yeah.
Because, there's a reason we're doing a female Pinhead in the newest iterations, because Doug Bradley, come on. He's like Robert Englund and Freddy Krueger. It goes hand in hand. So you can't replicate that. And furthermore, that was one of the people I didn't get to meet that I planned on meeting at that convention. Every time we went to go meet him, he either had a line or he wasn't there. So I missed out on meeting Doug Bradley. That was a shame. But my last movie that there are no redeeming qualities to this film whatsoever, and that is the remake of Psycho.
I figured that's what you were going to say.
I cannot, for the life of me, watch this film, because it is frame by frame a copy of what Hitchcock did. So if you are going to sit and watch a movie that is exactly the same as the original, just watch the original.
Yeah.
Because it's a classic for a reason. Yep. I don't need new actors put in these exact same roles with the exact same script doing the exact same thing. Why? Why would you do that?
You are preaching.
That one boggles my mind.
Yes.
To this day, I do not understand that. I know that there were a few liberties taken here and there, but it literally is side by side. It's the exact same movie. And I can't. You can sit there and say, well, if it's the exact same movie, it still is good. No.
It doesn't beat
not.
the original. There's so much more uniqueness to the original. And people might get turned off by it because it's in black and white, but yeah, I will agree with you there completely. I've watched both of those films, and I prefer the original.
Yeah. No, Anthony Perkins and Vince Vaughn, you cannot compare.
No.
Their performances are not comparable by any stretch. Vince Vaughn, he's a capable actor, but he is no Norman Bates.
No.
He did not play that character like Anthony Perkins did. Perkins just had this awkwardness about him. Yeah, he seemed very likable, but just kind of distant. And you feel that there's something underneath, but he's so damn charming, and you're just like, I kind of like him, but I'm not so sure if I trust him. I'm not 100% sure. And he just played these leveled, so many layers to his performance. It just makes it so perfect. And that's why he is so well associated with that. And if you got a problem with black and white, then, you need to get over that, because you're missing out on a lot of good movies. And Psycho is definitely one of those movies that you'd be missing out on. So get over that. That's all I can say about that. If you've got any kind of issues with black and white films, you need to get over that, because you're missing out on a lot of great horror films. And not just horror films in general, just good films in general. And you're doing yourself a disservice all because you have this problem with a lack of color. And trust me, I've been there. I used to be the same way. But
you don't need it.
You just have to watch them more. You have to see what they're capable of. Find you a lot of good, solid movies. Like I would probably recommend quite a few that I could think of off the top of my head that are just solid films that are in black and white. And then once you find that one film that you can watch in black and white, it makes all the others easier. I understand you want the color, but there are really good films in black and white. You can't just judge a film based on its lack of color. So, yeah, it's Gus Van Sant. I feel like he became a very auteur filmmaker. Like, he did some good work, and then he just decided, I'm going to do whatever. Like, there was another film he did, I think, called Elephant, if it's the one I'm thinking of, that it was kind of a Columbine-esque film about two kids that shoot up a school. And the entire film was done with a singular camera shot. So, granted, obviously there had to be cuts somewhere, but just about every scene that was set up was camera following one character to a point, and then if they met up with someone, maybe we'd start following that new character, and so on and so forth. And it's a very artsy film in the fact that we're trying something. I know that I think that movie 1917, I can't remember who directed it. Sam Mendes, I think, directed that. He did something very similar. It was like one continuous shot. And I know that other people have done that too. But something in that film, it just didn't work because it was slow. Like when you're walking with someone for 5 minutes, you're like, Jesus, what are we doing, man? What are you doing? It's like, I don't need this. Cut, So I feel like he's a little overrated, and what he did here feels like one of those auteur things, like where he's just like, well, I'm just going to do shot for shot. We'll just remake. Why? I don't understand it. For me, I've come to this realization that I feel like I want remakes. If you're going to do it, and 9 times out of 10, it seems like that the best approach to a remake seems to be that if you're going to do it, take elements, like take the base premise of the idea and just work with that simple plot, but make it your own. Make it stand out as your work based on this one idea. As we were sitting there talking before, with Infernal Affairs and The Departed, and I know they're not horror movies, but just follow me here. We're talking about 2 movies that are obviously from 2 parts of the world, so remaking something like that feels like you're just trying to make it accessible to an audience in another country. Yep. And obviously the changes you have to make there do work. One of the remakes that I'm a little iffy on right now because I have such a love for it, and I know you do too, is for Train to Busan. And I know they're trying to make that happen over here, so it's an Americanized version of it. But I'm afraid that something about it will be lost in translation, and it shouldn't be. Because the film itself, zombies on a train. Okay, I know that's the simplest plot, but zombies on a train. The stories are interchangeable as far as the emotional impact. You can make that work. Don't lose that. Okay, if you're going to remake it, don't lose that element to it, but make it your own in whatever way you got to do it, because obviously China or Hong Kong is not America. So you've got to find a way to make that work. But is it Hong Kong? No, it's Korea. Why am I thinking Hong Kong? Korea. Yeah. Because I was talking about Infernal Affairs and that was Chinese. Hong Kong. Korea. That's where I'm going. So it's a South Korean horror film. I don't know where my head's at. Anyway, the stories can translate and work. It's just how they're executed. And I'm worried that it's going to lose value somehow. Because we've seen, as all these movies we've talked about right here, they take the premise and think, well, this will work, just copy and paste, but you're translating it to a new audience. That worked for the Korean audience, but it also worked as a whole because it's a universal message about humanity and what you would do in those situations. If you've never seen Train to Busan, people, go check that out, because I'm so afraid that people are only going to watch, or you're going to have a group of people who are going to miss the classic. And then this remake's going to come out, which again, it's in good hands, maybe, I hope, because James Wan is in it. So I feel like it's in capable hands, but anything can happen. And I feel like something's going to be lacking,
And yeah, I think it'll be one of those things we'll have to watch it, and hopefully, I'll hope for the best. That's all we can do. But you actually kind of brought up what some of the closing stuff was going to be, talking about, what to look for in remakes. And I think you summed it up pretty well. You have to know your audience when you're doing these kind of films, and you have to take the time to make it worthwhile. Make it original. Don't just make it a copy and paste, and realize that sometimes things need to come over from the originals. Certain ideas need to come over, and certain ideas that the originals didn't use, well, there's a reason that they didn't. It's very touch base. But I think it just boils down to just try to make a good movie, It's not hard if you really just take the time.
As you said, knowing your audience, know your slasher. If you're going to be remaking a slasher film, know your slasher, okay, and what makes them tick. I think the biggest issue that I had, and we didn't talk about this one, but we'll touch on it right now, the remake of Halloween, Rob Zombie's Halloween, what makes that movie less impactful for me is the portrayal of Michael, because there's something in exploring who he is and watching him, seeing him as a kid, seeing him as a troubled kid going through the institution and not being some quiet mute for 18 years, it changes him. It changes your perception of that character. Therefore, he doesn't seem like the boogeyman. He just seems like some troubled kid who goes on a killing spree. And
it really takes away from it.
Yeah, and you miss the bigger picture of who that character is. It's not very hard. And of all people, if Rob Zombie was such a huge fan of Halloween, as he said, he could have seen that making that small distinction and making that adjustment to the character, however fascinating it was, hurt the character overall, because now he doesn't feel like Michael Myers, or is the character that we know. So again, know your audience. Understand that you can be original, but you have to remain true to the things that make these things work. There are elements that you have to make them work as one of those films. But then put them down as bullet points. This has to be intact, but everything else is free game.
I will agree with you on that completely. Other than that, I know this was a rather fast show, but we got to our talking points fairly quick. Other than that, I think we are pretty well set. I think, like you said, and like I will reiterate again, know your audience, know your source material, make it work. Next episode, we will be discussing our part 2, Remakes from Hell, films that are fire, which will be films that are fantastic remakes, and there are quite a few. For all the bad, there is some good. Other than that, if you want to tell the people where they can hear us at, you're so much better at that than I am.
Well, first of all, if you have a horror remake that you despise, hit us up on Twitter, at Horror Ramblings Podcast, and let us know what your absolute worst choice of a horror remake is, the one that you despise the most, or if you agree with the ones that we've chosen. Those were just a snippet of what we think. I mean, there are plenty more that we could have probably gone into.
Oh, we will have another show about this.
Oh, yes. But yeah, tell us what you think on Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter. You can listen to us on Podbean. You can listen to us on Spotify. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts and Anchor and all these wonderful podcast places that we're out there now. We'll be any and everywhere. And the easiest place to go is if you want to go to pencilpaperproductions.com/horrorramblings. Links in the show notes. You can go there, and you can always keep up with us there. Anything that we've got going on, Twitter feeds, and all that jazz.
Well, with that, everybody, I think we're going to close out the show. Just remember to stay spooky out there, guys.
This has been the Horror Ramblings Podcast. Join us next time for even more horror.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.